It was a time when legends ruled the skies.
He was filled with a sense of invincibility.
One legend, time and memory has not eroded, the tale of the notorious Red Baron. In 1918, Manfred von Richthofen, the peerless German ace, was shot down by a single bullet.
It would pass through the liver, through the heart, and through the two main blood vessels of the body.
But who fired the fatal shot? In the fields of France, guns blaze again, this time to shoot down a mystery that has baffled historians for over 80 years.
This machine is absolutely bloody fantastic.
Spot on, isn't it? Anyway, you point it. Fire!
World War I, the Great War. Not many names from that long-ago conflict are familiar today. A notable exception is Manfred Baron von Richthofen, the Red Baron. An expert flyer and a superb marksman, the 25-year-old German aristocrat commanded a crack air squadron in the Imperial Air Service. From 1916 onwards, the squadron known as Richthofen's Flying Circus terrorized their foes in the skies over northern France. Many tried to shoot the Baron down, and many died trying. In January of 1917, von Richthofen had grown so confident of his own abilities that he painted his plane bright red as a taunt to his enemies, thus earning his famous nickname.
Manfred was a star. He became a star because the high command needed success, and they didn't have much of success on the ground. So they made these pilots heroes.
By April 1918, the Red Baron had single-handedly downed 80 enemy aircraft. That month, von Richthofen himself became a victim. The day he died, a mystery began. Who actually shot the Baron out of the sky? More than 80 years on, the answer to that question remains elusive. We tracked down a man in Brisbane, Australia, who remembers that distant day. He was there as a 20-year-old medic.
The front itself, it was pretty grim. Water in the trenches. The rats were as big as cats. You were never free of shells or bombs. It was constant. Shocking wounds, terrible wounds. That many you couldn't count them.
Ted Smout witnessed hundreds of deaths in that horrific war, but one in particular stands out.
When he was lying there, dying, I felt no pity for him at all.
Smout is the last living eyewitness to the events of April the 21st, 1918. He not only saw the Baron's plane shot down, he watched the man die right in front of him.
Oh, it was a clear day. We were out in a rest area, less than a kilometre behind the line. We were actually making a cup of tea. And we could see these planes having a dogfight up above the front line. And then a couple of them peeled off. We saw this red triplane coming down.
Smout caught sight of the plane only because the Baron had made a serious mistake. He had chased a British plane into Allied territory, and a storm of gunfire from troops in foxholes below.
Made a fairly good landing, but when he landed, it slewed round to the right.
Smout was surprised by how relatively unscathed the Baron actually was.
Everyone was having a pot shot. That was the amazing thing, that he only got one bullet.
Scores of shooters, hundreds of bullets, but only a single shot killed the Baron. Who fired it? Who killed the Red Baron? Several differing accounts of the events of April the 21st, 1918 exist, but these are the basic facts. Around 10:45 a.m., a dogfight erupted over German lines between two squadrons, an Allied unit and the Red Baron's flying circus. Lieutenant Wilfred May, a young Canadian pilot on his first combat mission, broke away from the pack and started running for home. The Allied pilots were flying Sopwith Camel biplanes, state-of-the-art for the time. The Camels had a top speed of 200 kilometers per hour. Each had 2 machine guns mounted on top of the engine, fitted with a synchronization gear to enable firing between the blades of the propeller. 10:55, the Baron gave chase. Von Richthofen's Fokker DR-1 triplane had a top speed of only 175 kilometers per hour, but it was highly maneuverable, more than a match for the Camel, and the Red Baron's combat skills were unparalleled. 80 pilots had bravely faced him in battle. All had failed. Soon, the Camel and the triplane were rushing westward, down the Somme Valley, almost clipping the treetops and nearly hitting the church steeple in the French village of Vaux-sur-Somme. RAF squadron leader Roy Brown saw a compatriot under the guns of the Red triplane and dove down to help. 10:58. Captain Brown put in a burst of fire and saw the Red triplane veer to the right. Brown pulled up and headed off to the northeast to the aid of another RAF pilot in distress. At around the same moment, Australian gunners on the ground opened up on the Red triplane. 11 a.m. The Baron's plane was down in a field near a chimney stack. He was still alive, but seconds after Australian troops got there, he was dead. The cause? A single bullet wound through the chest. What happened in the last 2 minutes of von Richthofen's life?
Well, at first glance, it looks almost impossible to determine who was responsible for his death because of the fluid action, the number of people firing at him. Bullets are flying from every direction. There's hills, there's valleys, there's trees, and so there is no one that sees all of the action. They see snippets of it.
Who fired the fatal shot? Was it Captain Roy Brown, the Canadian pilot who rushed to the aid of a colleague in trouble? In a war with few heroes, everyone wanted to believe that courageous Captain Brown had shot down the Baron. Many believe it still. But there are other stories from that day. Stories from men whose names have been forgotten. Snowy Evans, Robert Buey, Cedric Popkin, 3 unheralded machine gunners on the ground. They too fired at the Red triplane. Could one of these men have killed the Red Baron? Using 21st century technology, Unsolved History will reconstruct the events of April the 21st, 1918. We've assembled an expert team to do the job.
It's really difficult to fly when you don't have a horizon line.
Daniel Martinez is the chief investigator. Pilots Michael Selig and Brian Fuse create software to simulate flight. Ballistics expert Gary James. David King, who specializes in gunshot wounds. Laser experts Steve Harvey and Lawrence Ryan. Expert marksman Mike Yardley. And historian Alan Bennett. At 11 a.m. that morning, the Red Baron, his chest pierced by a bullet, made an emergency landing. But where? At the time, so-called witnesses identified 4 different fields as the landing site. Alan Bennett has gathered every available scrap of evidence about von Richthofen's last flight.
There were so many contradictions and arguments. So the key seemed to be the eyewitnesses said the triplane came to a rest near a big mound of earth in the field. If I could find that mound of earth in the field, that would give us a definite answer.
Whilst examining aerial photos of the area, taken a few weeks before the event, Bennett detected a promising shadow in the middle of a field. Equipped with a global positioning system, he travelled to Picardy to try and locate that spot. In Vaux-sur-Somme, Bennett's hunch was confirmed. The town's mayor for 30 years was Henri de la Place. It runs in the family. His grandfather was mayor in 1918 and saw the Baron's plane come down.
Et a constaté cet avion de Richthofen était tombé ici, à quelques mètres près, à cet endroit.
Nous avons une différence très petite.
Très petite différence.
6 mètres. We have proven something. Now we know the exact place where the triplane came to rest.
We also know the exact time it came to rest, 11 a.m. on April the 21st. If we can go back in time just 2 minutes earlier, to the moment the shooting began, it may be possible to discover who fired the shot that took von Richthofen out of the sky for good. By 1918, the brutality and appallingly high casualties suffered by Allied forces in the fields of Picardy had ground down morale both in the trenches and at home. The symbolic importance of felling the Red Baron cannot be overestimated. So it was no surprise that in their combat reports, 3 different men claimed to have fired the fatal shot. Only one of these reports was deemed likely by the British High Command, Captain Roy Brown's. But did the Canadian pilot really shoot down von Richthofen? Or was the Baron brought down by a lucky shot fired from the ground? Complicating matters is the fact that all the guns involved, both on the ground and in the air, fired the same caliber bullet, a .303 rifle round. Alan Bennett has documented the events leading up to the hail of gunfire that erupted at 10:58 a.m.
Lieutenant May, being chased by the Baron, came down the canal directly towards us. They were skimming the surface of the water. When they came to the corner, they didn't make the turn. They passed right overhead where we are, across into the distance and down to Vaux-sur-Somme. But Lieutenant May came down that street there, just above those red rooftops, came across, and over the roof of the church, just missed the church tower. The Red Baron was hot on his tail, and they disappeared in that direction over the trees.
Only at a pontoon bridge just west of Vaux-sur-Somme did anyone actually see Brown's plane dive down on the Baron.
There was a crew repairing this particular pontoon bridge, and they heard aircraft engines, and they saw the Red Baron chasing Lieutenant May. Roy Brown did not pass this spot. He turned around and he went back that way to help another pilot who was in difficulties.
Was Brown's single, brief diving attack responsible for the Red Baron's demise? Although never made official by the Army, Captain Brown's claim was widely accepted. It was the story people wanted to believe.
I'm quite sure that Captain Brown shot down the Red Baron.
This seat is very famous. It's one of our most famous artifacts.
In Canada, Roy Brown became a national hero.
Looks like
bullet holes, is it?
Margaret Harmon, daughter of Roy Brown and Denny May, Lieutenant Wilfred May's son, came to the Royal Canadian Military Institute in Toronto to see one of its prized possessions, war trophies donated by Roy Brown. One is this seat, ripped from the Baron's plane. In a straight line across its back are a series of holes. Many like to believe that these are bullet holes from Roy Brown's machine gun. Fact or myth?
That's the same, exactly the same diameter as what they would have had.
It's the same type of bullet.
Well, let's try that in here and see. Okay, well that sure doesn't fit, does it?
Well, we've seen today, they're not bullet holes. They're rivet holes to mount the seat to the skeleton of the airplane.
All right.
And they are not bullet holes.
The myth of the bullet holes in the seat is just one of many surrounding Brown's attack on the Baron.
Now, here's an example of what can happen. I have Floyd Gibbons' book on the Red Knight of Germany. I'll read you a piece of it. Brown had arrived at the end of his dive. His sights came to bear on the red machine. The bullets hit the tail first. A slight pull on the stick, and the line of fire started to tuck a seam up the body of the Fokker. That's absolute rubbish, because due to the vibration involved, you do not get a straight line of bullets. It looks like a shotgun. And here's a photograph of the triplane. There's not a single bullet hole in the tail, and there's not a single bullet hole along the top of the fuselage. The whole story is pure nonsense, and I'm surprised it's been taken seriously for so long.
It's been said that history is an agreed-upon lie. And if that is the case, there's certainly a number of instances where it's occurred, and it occurred here on this story, in the case of Captain Brown, a whole creation of how he systematically and surgically shot at the Red Baron. He never said that.
But that doesn't mean Brown didn't fire the fatal shot. He certainly believed he had. To either validate or disprove the history book version of events, we'll recreate that final dogfight. A few planes from World War I are still flying today, but reenacting a dogfight with the intensity of that 1918 life and death struggle would be foolhardy with these fragile antiques. Luckily, there's another way to recreate the air battle. In a flight simulator. Michael Selig and Brian Fuse are skilled pilots, aerodynamic engineers, and writers of commercial-grade flight simulator software. To help solve this mystery, they will build a Sopwith Camel and a Fokker DR-1 inside a sophisticated computer.
What's really important is that the pilot has the real challenges that they had back in World War I, and that's just on the aerodynamic side, and then there's also the gun side.
We'll calculate the aerodynamic forces on it, we'll deal with the vibration effects, and as we do that, we'll actually check for where those rounds are hitting.
Hitting a target with a machine gun fixed to a vibrating wind-buffeted aircraft is extremely difficult. The way they did it was to get very close.
In actual combat, typically you'd want to get right on the guy's tail, within 30 feet.
Right.
When Captain Brown attacked the Baron, the odds were against his scoring a hit. He probably dove down at full throttle, reaching nearly 300 kilometers an hour before opening fire at a range of about 300 meters, too far away for any sort of accuracy. And at that speed, he would have had to pull away at around 90 meters to avoid a collision. This is the encounter that Fuse and Selig will reconstruct, but they need another bit of information to create the virtual dogfight. The exact trajectories of the bullets that Brown fired at the Baron. That's where firearms expert Gary James comes in.
Yeah, the Vickers gun was a very, very reliable arm. It had a cyclic rate, the ground-mounted guns, of about 500 rounds per minute, and in the air they beefed that up to 850 to 900 rounds.
Like any machine gun, the Vickers gun grows less accurate the faster it's fired.
What we're trying to determine here is the actual spread of the bullets that would be fired from Brown's Vickers gun. We'll be measuring the spread, and we'll be firing it probably about 175 yards. Look at that, not too bad. Not too bad.
Pretty good.
So what do you reckon? I'd say, let's measure the far extreme here.
16
Looks about 16.
Roy Brown's gun would have scattered more than this. It was sitting directly on top of the Camel's 150 horsepower engine, a very unstable gun platform. Just how unstable soon became clear to our investigators. By mounting a laser pointer on the cowling of an antique camel, they test how much the engine's vibration would deflect a shot.
So this thing vibrates, shakes, there's the laser light. Okay.
Okay. It looks like what we've got going here is that as we're applying power, we're getting a sweeping motion. But what we can see from this is when he holds the power in briefly, you can see that it's going over about a 2-inch dispersion.
When the gun's natural scatter is combined with the engine vibration, it creates a bullet spread of about 1 meter at a range of 300 meters. When the aerodynamics of the plane are factored in, the spread increases. Both the Camel and the Fokker were hard to control because of their rotary engines. The entire engine spun with the propeller, creating a heavy rotating mass that acted as a gyroscope.
And I dropped the ruler, yaws to the left. This made the Sopwith a bit of a beast to fly.
These gyroscopic forces would have made Brown's long-range shot even more inaccurate.
He's going to be diving at about a 45-degree dive. It's a rather steep dive for a World War I aircraft. And as he does, he's going to have to lead the Baron slightly. And when he does that, he's going to be pulling back on the stick. That's going to be lifting the nose, but then the gyroscopic effect is going to be yawing it to the right. So his aim is going to be thrown off a bit every time he does some sort of control effect on the aircraft.
Roy Brown was certainly fighting the odds. Perhaps the computer simulation of the Red Baron's final mission would unlock Brown's secret. Who killed the infamous Red Baron? Was it RAF pilot Roy Brown, the Canadian captain to whom the history books give credit? Or was Manfred von Richthofen shot down by someone on the ground? For the first time since that April afternoon in 1918, the Red Baron's final dogfight will be fought again in a scientifically based computer simulation.
This is wonderfully constructed.
Flying the primitive planes, even in simulation, is not easy.
It's really difficult to fly when you don't have a horizon line.
In the simulation, every 7th bullet fired is a visible tracer round. But every single bullet will be tracked to see if it passes through imaginary boxes around the Baron's head and torso. The computer will fly Lieutenant Wilfred May's plane on a pre-programmed course. Pilot Michael Selig will fly the Baron's red triplane, and pilot Brian Fuse will make Roy Brown's dive.
Okay, fellas, this is the mission, and this is what happened in Make's attack, trying to help out May, who's being pursued by the Red
The simulation picks up the action with Brown at 1,500 meters as he's about to dive to May's rescue.
Okay, let's get started.
All right. Begin.
And that's Brown flying up there. Now, what's your altitude right now?
2,100 feet.
Okay. And there's a river down below, and you can see the little village coming into view. This is really amazing. Look at that. And there's the church. Wow, whoa. There's the near miss. And Brown is now coming down for the attack.
Yep, 1,300 feet.
Boy, look at that up there. It's like I'm in the cockpit.
And I'm going to make my attack run now. Get in my sights. Which is hard to do.
Okay, there's tracers.
And you're banking away. Boy, that was quick. That's the end of the mission, fellas.
Brown's high-speed attack is over in seconds. The Baron diverts to the right after seeing the tracers zoom by him, exactly what happened in 1918. Did Captain Brown score any hits?
How'd you do?
Not too good. We didn't seem to score any hits this time. Mimicking that engagement, that's pretty tough to be able to get a hit.
Boy, it looked like, to me like you were putting some rounds into him.
Yeah, and a lot of times it'll come close, but it's pretty hard to hit at that range.
In 5 separate runs, Brian Fuse as Roy Brown failed to hit the Baron even once.
The target aircraft is very, very small. And in fact, in terms of the type of sights they have then, it doesn't even fill the inner circle. And it's just very difficult to have a chance of even getting a hit at that range.
It's now abundantly clear how difficult, almost impossible, it would have been for Brown to hit the Red Baron. But maybe he simply got lucky with a random .303 bullet from his machine gun. Is there any physical evidence to bear this out or to disprove it? There is. The mortal remains of Manfred von Richthofen. On the night of April the 21st, his body was examined by 2 RAF doctors. Although they took no photographs, their detailed report makes it possible to understand the Baron's wounds. They found significant injury to the face from the emergency landing, and clear evidence of a single bullet with a small entry wound in the right torso and a larger exit wound near the left nipple. The doctor's report concluded that the bullet could not have come from the ground, a clear endorsement for Brown. But there was a second opinion. The next morning, 2 army doctors saw the same wound and concluded only that it was caused by a .303 rifle bullet. This was the same caliber bullet that Brown fired, but also the bullet fired by anti-aircraft gunners on the ground. Forensic analysis in 1918 was primitive. Perhaps a modern pathologist can shed new, more expert medical light on the mystery. Dr. David King specializes in bullet wounds.
And here's the bullet. Fully jacketed, it's elongated. The center of gravity is towards the rear end of the bullet. It had great accuracy over long distances, but once it enters the body, it becomes very unstable in the body and it would tumble.
Whilst the entry wound of a .303 bullet is nondescript, its exit wound is distinctive.
But this is just the kind of wound I'd expect to see on the Red Baron from what we know of the descriptions of the doctors who examined him. This is what I'd expect to see if the bullet, still intact, tumbles in the body and exits sideways.
A tumbling .303 bullet is extremely destructive to the body. It drills through vital organs at supersonic speed, causing a shockwave. Even organs within 7 to 10 centimeters of the bullet track would be damaged by this shockwave.
Pass through the lungs, through the liver, through the heart, and I think certainly through the 2 main blood vessels of the body, the aorta and the inferior vena cava, producing devastating damage. I think he would have very rapidly lost consciousness, certainly under a minute, and died shortly afterwards.
This is where the timeline becomes critical, and where, finally, Roy Brown's claim falls apart. After Brown's attack at 10:58, the Baron swerved to the right, but the triplane did not head directly to the crash site. Instead, it flew over the position of Australian infantry gunner Cedric Popkin about 30 seconds later. About 30 seconds after that, it flew over the guns of 2 more Australians, Buey and Evans, who were sitting behind a ridge. If the Baron had been hit by Brown, he would have been by now unconscious. But instead, he turned his plane and headed for home, even making one more turn before the emergency landing in the field. 11 a.m., nearly 2 minutes after Brown's attack. Australian soldiers, Ted Smout among them, arrived at the downed plane. The Red Baron was still alive.
Got him out on the ground, and he just said one word, kaput, and died.
Had Brown's bullet hit von Richthofen, which now seems most unlikely, the Baron would have been dead before Smout reached him. The evidence is becoming persuasive that the most notorious figure in World War I was killed by an ordinary soldier on the ground. But which one of the gunners was it? Perhaps we can find out with the help of this high-powered laser and a light aircraft.
Fire! Go!
First, ballistics expert Gary James will determine the range from which the Baron was shot.
So this gelatinous material basically approximates the density of the human body. So this is it's about 16 inches long, which approximates the width of a torso.
This approximates what would happen to a human torso if fired upon at close range with a .303 bullet.
Woo-wee, look at this. Holy cow. You've got all sorts of bits and pieces here. Here's what's left of the goo.
The powerful shockwave from the bullet blows the whole rig apart.
There's no way that von Richthofen could have been hit at close range with a full house load like this. It would have caused considerably more damage than was actually found. I mean, this is absolutely amazing.
Eyewitnesses said that the bullet that killed the Baron was found inside his flight jacket, suggesting it was a long-range shot. By reducing the amount of gunpowder in the cartridge case, James simulates such a shot. A bullet fired from almost 750 meters away does this.
We hit pretty much inch below point of aim, which is exactly what we were aiming for. See if we have anything coming out the other end. Nope, nothing out the other end. We have a hole coming right out the side here. Pretty close to the end. So that would give credence to the fact that perhaps the Red Baron was hit at that distance with a .303 bullet.
Hitting the Baron from 3/4 of a kilometer away is nothing short of miraculous. But someone appears to have done just that. The question is, who? Historian Alan Bennett has made methodical studies of the eyewitness reports. He has narrowed the field to a short list of gunners, ones who could have fired the round that hit von Richthofen in his right torso.
The Baron passed over Popkin, but Popkin fired at him from behind, so that eliminates Popkin there. As he approached the 53rd Battery, Buey and Evans fired frontally, so they could not have hit him from the right. When the Baron made his U-turn, he then put his right wing towards Evans, and we know Evans fired at some time in this process. The Baron then approached Sergeant Popkin again, who opened fire once more from the right.
Both Evans and Popkin had a shot on the Baron's right flank at a range of 550 to 750 meters. To hit a moving target at that distance takes great skill and considerable luck. This is how big a 2.5 meter square target looks at 750 meters.
You're a little bit to the right, a bit of wind.
Although the Baron's plane was twice this long, it was moving. To hit a target at this range, you have to aim above it because the bullet in flight will drop more than 30 centimeters.
Look at that. Well, we got a few hits on there. It's amazing. We fired a lot more rounds than that. Looks like we got a spread, gosh, I'd say 6-7 feet. And I bet you not 1/10 of the rounds we fired are on there.
And remember that the Australian gunners didn't have the luxury of a stationary target. Theirs was flying at around 160 kilometers per hour.
They've got to react very, very rapidly, and they've only got a few seconds to get a number of rounds off. That would be quite a lucky shot.
Could a bullet fired from the ground have hit the Baron's plane at the angle necessary to create the wounds found in the autopsy? Those who insist that Roy Brown shot the Baron from the air maintain that that shot from the ground was impossible. But is it?
Oh!
Mike Yardley is one of Britain's top marksmen.
Okay guys, this is a Lewis gun, one of the classic machine guns of World War I. So you can imagine yourself leading an aeroplane, bang.
To hit a moving target, the gunner must aim ahead of it, because by the time the bullet gets there, the target has shifted.
So if you were engaging a plane, a First World War plane at, let's say, 400 yards, you'd probably have to be 4 fuselage lengths ahead of it if it was a crossing shot.
The ultimate test in our investigation would be to try to shoot down a real plane with real bullets. But without risking plane or pilot, we found the next best thing. For this experiment, Yardley will trade his gun for this high-output laser, programmed by experts Lawrence Ryan and Steve Harvey. The location couldn't be better. The same place from which the soldiers fired in 1918. First, Sergeant Popkin's position.
I'll tell you what, this machine is absolutely bloody fantastic.
Spot on, isn't it? Anyway, it's pointing.
Only one more technical difficulty has to be surmounted. A bullet takes crucial fractions of a second to strike a target at this range, but the laser beam reaches it almost instantaneously. To create a time delay, the angle of the laser must be deflected. Now the laser will better mimic the gun. The laser will send out 7 short pulses each second. Each pulse represents a bullet. The laser is programmed to scatter these bullets the same way the Lewis gun would have done.
Well, here's the map of the flight.
Alan Bennett briefs the pilots on the route their plane is to fly, as close as possible to the Red Baron's final flight.
To the second laser point, so then we turn south.
Yardley dons a pair of goggles that cut out all green light from his vision.
As I pass the glasses into the beam, it is completely stopped and nothing appears on the ground behind. Therefore, we shall make you wear these glasses whilst you're aiming at the plane so that you can't see the laser, which would obviously help you significantly.
These pilots are about to fly back to 1918. First, a dry run to see if everything checks out.
Attention, James, first passage. Everybody's ready? Already. Okay, they're coming. And fire.
Got some problems with the gimbal.
The laser needs some adjustments, and there's a disagreement about the route.
He has to pass overhead where we are.
A few minor course corrections and the test is ready to begin. Is history about to be rewritten? Whose shot dealt a mortal blow to Manfred von Richthofen, the notorious Red Baron? In the fields of Picardy, a test is underway to determine just that. A carefully programmed high-output laser is standing in for a World War I Lewis gun. To make sure the laser hits on the plane are clearly visible, the experiment takes place after dark. This is just a warm-up for Marksman Yardley. The range is too short and Sergeant Popkin never claimed to have hit the plane from behind. The real test will be the long-range shots to be fired after the plane has turned around, as the Red Baron did, to head for safety.
Here it comes. Running. Okay, and fire! You dive in.
In 11 seconds of firing, Yardley hits the plane 20 times. Half the hits are right on the cockpit.
I've shot just about everything there is to shoot over the years, but never a contraption like this. And I think we showed tonight that we could have shot down the Red Baron.
It seems clear that Sergeant Popkin could have shot von Richthofen. But there is still another man in the running. He too deserves a shot at immortality. Just as in 1918, a small plane crests a ridge and a marksman takes aim. Our investigation into the death of the Red Baron is almost complete. Snowy Evans was the last machine gunner to fire at the Baron. The first time he fired was as von Richthofen approached him. Mike Yardley takes the same opportunity.
Okay, fire!
He gets a few hits. This short-range frontal shot isn't what killed the Baron, but he probably saw tracer bullets whizzing by. He turned for home, thus exposing his right flank to Gunner Evans. Will Yardley make this shot with the laser?
7-foot lead, fire!
Decker, 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 decker. Did we hit him?
He missed. But the marksman isn't ready to give up. Yardley asks the aircraft to loop around for another run.
Right, coming round to the left. Here we go. There he is.
If he can make the shot, then his 1918 counterpart, Gunner Snowy Evans, could have made the shot as well.
Okay. Decker, 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 decker. Decker, 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 decker. Oh, hit. Right, cool. Cease firing. That's good. That's interesting, because that one shot could have been the one shot that killed the Red Baron, couldn't it?
It's at the angle, yeah.
Yeah, and that was just the angle, wasn't it? Right-hand side, bullet entry.
Yeah.
Left-hand side, bullet exit.
Our experiment shows that either Popkin or Evans could have fired the long-range shot. But if both of them did, who hit the target? Or did only one of them fire? This final mystery may be solved, not in the fields of France, but in Alan Bennett's treasure trove of papers. Our investigation spurred Bennett to re-examine the archives. One document he unearthed may be the missing piece that completes the puzzle. In 1935, Sergeant Popkin wrote a letter to the official Australian war historian describing his part in the events of that day. He attached a sketched map, a map that had been lost for 70 years. Popkin actually fired only between these two X's when the Baron was exposing not his right side, but his front.
Sergeant Popkin says as the triplane was heading towards him and he was firing at it, it suddenly jerked. And he believed that he had hit the pilot at that time. But Popkin was firing frontally at the triplane, so it doesn't look as though he did.
By his own testimony, Sergeant Popkin is eliminated from the running. Of all the candidates, Brown, Popkin, Buey, the only one left is Snowy Evans. A man of whom not a single photograph exists. A man who died childless, a drifter in 1925. Was he the man who shot the Red Baron? If so, like millions of his fellow soldiers in the Great War, he has passed into history and oblivion.
We don't have the gun. We don't have the bullet. We don't have the evidence to cement this case. All we know is that Captain Brown was not the one that shot down the Red Baron. It was the Australian infantryman.
It's ironic that the man who killed Manfred von Richthofen may never have known that he brought a legend crashing to Earth. But for another man, almost a century later, the passion of that long-ago day lives on.
It was a great thing to see the Red Baron shot down, to see the end of him. It was a good thing because he had been a menace.
For the ordinary troops who lived and died in the modern blood of the trenches, the death of the Red Baron was a great triumph.
He was filled with a sense of invincibility. He totally disregarded his own rules, never to attack alone. This was the mistake.
April the 21st, 1918. A day when David slew Goliath in the fields of France.